Hi, my name's Andy, and I'm struck by 7 words. Jesus looked at him and loved him. They come from that Bible reading we just heard. Jesus is having a conversation with a man who effectively asks him, "How do I get into heaven?" Now, that is so completely the wrong question. There are lots of better ones he could have asked. Questions like, how do I truly worship God? Or what would you have me do? Or how can I live well with others in my community? Or how do I love the way that you love? But no, this man doesn't get it. He thinks there's a list of things he needs to do if he's to be acceptable to God. He isn't interested in God or his neighbors. He's only really interested in himself. And Jesus looks at him and loves him. Jesus doesn't sort of look past him to see if there's somebody over his shoulder who's a bit less self-obsessed that he could have a more successful conversation with. Jesus looked at him and loved him. And I don't know about you, but I find when I come to pray, I'm very aware that Jesus is looking at me. And that could be unnerving. Here's a person who knows everything I've ever said, everything I've ever done, everything I've ever thought, everything I've ever hoped for, and he's looking at me. But actually, it isn't as scary as it sounds, because the look of Jesus isn't judgmental or disapproving or ashamed of me. Jesus's look is the look of love. There is something in me that wants to be known completely. There's something else in me that's afraid of being known completely. But in Jesus, my need for disclosure is met, and my fears of exposure are smoothed away. Jesus looked at him and loved him. Jesus loved him enough to invite him to join the Jesus people, even though his motives weren't quite right. I mean, none of our motives are quite right, actually, are they? But Jesus also loved him enough to tell him the truth, which is that he's not going to be able to follow Jesus until he's dealt with the thing that's holding him back from relating to Jesus, which is to say, his money. When Jesus looks at you and loves you, he doesn't force you to follow. He respects you, and he respects your God-given autonomy so much that he lets you walk away sad if you so choose, just as this man did. Jesus looked at him. So I'm left with a challenge to do the same, to look at people, to give them my full attention. Now, please don't misunderstand me. There are plenty of blind people who are a lot better at giving others their full attention than a lot of sighted people are. This isn't about how our eyes function. It's about how our regard functions. That's a different thing. To look at someone properly is to refuse to be distracted by my preformed opinion of their outward appearance or their attitude or how like me or unlike me their skin color or their accent is, how attractive or unattractive they are, or their choice of clothing or whatever. Now, when you're looking at somebody on Zoom, or if they're masked so that you can't see their mouth, there are particular skills that we're all going to need to learn. For example, it's useful to be able to tell from somebody's eyes whether they're smiling or not. Jesus looked at him and loved him. So I need to learn to love people, including people like this young man who don't get what the heart of God is like and a hoarding excess that should be redistributed to the poor. Oh, there are words to be said, and I need to have the courage to say them, but before I say anything, I need to check that I love them. It's not easy sometimes. It's like eating an elephant, best done one chunk at a time. And if that joke seems in poor taste, apologies to any elephants that are watching the ordinary office today. I justify myself by mentioning that Jesus tells a similar joke in this same story. He says, rich people relating right to God is like a camel passing through the eye of a needle, which is to say impossible, without extensive use of a very good liquidizer. But then he says, mind you, with God, nothing's impossible. So it's not an unkind joke after all. It's a kind one. Because Jesus still loves this rich man, even if for the moment, the only thing Jesus is looking at is the back of the man's head getting smaller as he walks sadly away. So let's finish not with Jesus, not with our attempts to imitate Jesus, but with Jesus himself. Jesus looks at him and loves him. And each of those words matter. Jesus looks at you and loves you. Jesus looks at you and loves you. Jesus looks at you and loves you. And finally, it is Jesus. Jesus for whom the universe exists. Jesus who made water wet and gloss paint glossy. Jesus who is the reason there are leaves on a tree. Jesus who was born for you, lives for you, died for you, rose for you, will come back and take you home. It is Jesus who looks at you and loves you. Amen.